Sales Representative at Amgen. Tarver holds a bachelor's degree in chemistry with a minor in mathematics from Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis. Ashley has served for major companies such as Eli Lilly and Company, Univar, Praxair, and PQ Corporation. A results-driven sales professional and account manager, Tarver has a track record of consistently exceeding established goals and objectives, positively impacting sales revenue, market share, account performance, and client relations for her employers. Her current clientele profile includes both national and international vendors, including Japan, Canada, and Mexico. Tarver has closed successful sales contracts with Fortune 500 companies such as Norfolk Southern Railway and Bayer. An experienced leader, communicator, and negotiator, Tarver has expertise on OEM account sales, key account management, CRM, sales and marketing, product training and placement, and associated functions. Her career accolades are endless and include chairman's rank, regional rookie of the year, being promoted to district sales trainer and regional ABEN lead. Ashley finds time to be an entrepreneur, CEO of Chef Nicole, a thriving business as a personal private chef specializing in private dining. Most importantly, Ashley is the mother of Dorian, a Merrillville High School honors student who graduates in May of 2021, just like me. Congrats. Welcome, Ashley, today.
And I would like to add something else about my great friend and colleague, Ashley Tarver. She is also a woman of Kappa Alpha, sorority, and corporate, Kappa chapter, where she became a member, initiated into that chapter in 2009. She is also the business owner of residential properties. She also is a small business owner of a clothing boutique in Southwest Mall. And she has had successful businesses in cosmetics as well as in hair. I want to introduce my very best friend and great colleague, Ashley Talbert, to you all.
Oh, thank you, my soror and best. She's my sister friend. Okay. So hello to all of you all. Many thanks and appreciation for all of the key members of the panel, those who have introduced themselves before me. I'm going to make this a very personable presentation. I'm not presenting any slides. I'm going to simply speak to you all authentically about my career trajectory, but more importantly, connecting it to how it's transitioned me to have to learn and navigate through a virtual environment, which I'm in today. So thank you again to Helen and Emma, your president and secretary of the organization. Helen, thank you for the wonderful intro. As Helen has kind of journeyed you all through, I've had what I would consider a fun career trajectory. So I'll just kind of go through that a little bit. Started out at IUPUI, UIPUI, some people call it, which is Indiana University and Purdue University that share the same campus in Indianapolis. I was a direct admit into the Purdue School of Science, so I am technically a Purdue grad. I have a degree in chemistry with a minor concentration in mathematics. I always had a knack for STEM, specifically math and science, coming out of high school, going into college. So I chose to continue my studies at IUPUI in an area where I knew I was strong and where it drove me and caught my attention. But I'll admit, while being there at IUPUI, I shared this with Emma as we started, that freshman year and even transitioning throughout that time, you're juggling so many different moving parts, from managing your schedule, from ensuring that not only are you taking the classes and courses that your degree requires, but also fitting in classes and courses that help build you as a person, both personally and professionally. For me, it was really important to ensure, I'm in, well, I like to call myself a introverted extrovert, if that sounds, if that even makes sense. Or right, no, that's what you would call it. I'm an outgoing introvert. So I love my personal time. I can be at home, watching TV, reading a book, but when it's time to be on and be, at the top of something, be a presenter, a leader, a teacher, I do thrive in that environment. And because I knew that about myself, I also made sure that I took courses along the way that helped me to build my personal speaking, public speaking skills, as well as my leadership skills and business acumen. So upon graduating IUPUI, I'll admit I was in a situation where I didn't have a job right away and wasn't exactly sure how I was going to enter the chemical industry. If you all know anything about majoring in a science, and my background is chemistry, I also had a good deal of biology, you tend to get the best opportunities if you first continue on and go to a master's program, potentially, of course, obtaining your master's and then later on some form of a PhD. I knew for me, both personally and professionally, because I am, or rather I was, a teen mom. And so I went away to school and I had my son back at home with family. It was going to be important for me that upon graduating, I entered the sales force and began to establish a foundation professionally, even if I did consider going back to school later. So through the process of networking, which I'm sure you all have heard, but if not, networking is key. So one of the things, if you all are also taking some notes, would be great if you can get a notepad and paper on some of the things that I drop here for you. Even while you're in this virtual environment, building a network and making your presence known is going to be something that will take you so far through every aspect of your career. And I mean that from starting even with your professors. Obviously, being individuals who are great with deadlines, having things turned in on time, being punctual for classes, stepping up to be leaders of teams or groups, asking for other opportunities, those things get you noticed, and you create a network for people to be willing to speak for you and on your behalf. What you will find out that can turn into mentorship, and more importantly, it can lead to sponsorship. In the professional realm, I've had some wonderful mentors who later turned on to sponsors, and a little bit of the difference of that is that your mentor can kind of help guide you through things, maybe get you connected to other people based on maybe how they've established themselves. Your trajectory can piggyback off of their experience, but a sponsor is someone who is established maybe even at a higher director level, executive level, and they're the ones that will speak up for you and about you when you're not in the room. And normally their voice has a lot of power. So when your name comes out of their mouth, for example, let's say some of you all have had an opportunity to network with Ms. Myrick's or even Mr. Butler, and when they speak of you, whoever they're speaking of you to can likely open up some doors. So 2 key nuggets right there: network, get a mentor, and eventually have a sponsor. But I'll try to stay on target, right? I've got a lot of stuff to cover. So I entered the chemical industry through an internship after college. Now, a lot of times you're used to interning while you're in college in between your different years, but I graduated and then got a paid internship. And that was my first entry into the chemical industry and gave me my core foundation of actually performing as a chemist. Because what you also find is experience is key. But that experience, you can use that and build that through volunteer opportunities as well as your internships. So I interned at a company by the name of Ineos, and I did some work as a bench chemist, doing some projects with someone who was actually a family friend. That opportunity then led me to enter the automotive coatings industry, where I worked for a company by the name of Nippon V Coatings. While all of this may sound like mumbo jumbo, here's the fun, cool piece. I actually had the opportunity at that time to be a formulating chemist who actually created the tuxedo black as well as the bumblebee yellow coatings that was on the Camaro when it relaunched. So the cool thing about that process is I got an opportunity to connect and work with your large automotive providers, which are Ford, GM, Chrysler, and even Toyota, which afforded me an opportunity to build relationships abroad in Japan. And so I was able to be on meetings as well as provide my professional and chemical expertise on how their formulations would work best on their paints and their coatings. So great experience there. What I found out quickly though about myself and what I knew going in is that being a bench chemist, working sometime, 8 to 12 hours a day in a lab, running tests, being in and out of a factory, in a steel toe, in a hard hat, as well as steel toe shoes, wrapped up, going in between the elements, outside, winter snow, that wasn't necessarily an atmosphere that I wanted to spend my entire career in. And so after 6 months or so, and I had proven that I could manage the tasks I was given, I started having conversations with my manager about the trajectory and where I could go in my career. So that would be the next nugget that I would drop for you all, whether in person or virtually. Have conversations with your superiors early about where you see yourself or where you're interested. Begin to ask them if there's a way that you can put together a performance plan on how you can get there. Number one, that shows your eagerness to steadily progress, but also that holds them accountable in making sure they're doing their part in developing you. A key piece to any manager is ensuring that the team that works underneath them is developed professionally. So make that be a note for you as well. Be very vocal about what you want. It also lets you know early on if the company that you're at will even be the best place for you. What I found out is that in most cases, people stayed in the role and position that I was in for up to 5 years before they were really given an opportunity to transition into other roles. And I knew in the back of my mind that wasn't going to work for me. However, I was steadfast and still continued to perform at a high level while also beginning to put my resume out there. Now, when we talk about putting your resume out there, one of the key things I had to learn early on is documenting for yourself every milestone, big or small, and achievements that you make. So even as a chemist, when I was put on a team whose formula was later chosen to be the final one for the coatings, I documented that. When I was, if I was given a project and I was able to finish it before the deadline, you document that and you show how under intense pressure, you can still perform with accuracy and meet or exceed deadlines. Because of the nature of my personality, being outgoing, I'm a people person, I love to talk, and some would say that I could probably sell ice to a polar bear. I began to look at chemical companies and seek opportunities for sales. What I knew was that staying inside of a lab wasn't something I enjoyed, but I still wanted to stay in the realm of a technical atmosphere because that was my strong point. So I was later presented with an opportunity to work at Praxair, where I sold industrial gas. Sounds funny, but the air that we breathe freely, I sold that to people. I guess you got to be pretty skilled to breathe free air and sell it. But what I actually sold was the components of it. So your oxygen, your nitrogen, your argon, your carbon dioxide. That transition into sales was actually an inside sales job. So it's similar to what a virtual environment would be like we're in today. The clients and customers that I had to negotiate contracts with, I didn't see them in person. I had to learn to develop the skill of selling over the phone, being able to control my voice, understanding that even the posture that you present allows your listener to know whether or not you're in a good mood or a sad mood. Even if you're smiling while you're talking, people can hear that in your voice. Or when you're being stern and you're getting down to business, that transitions over through your voice. In addition to that, how you draft emails, the language that you position in your email, whether you're being very firm, being friendly. But more importantly, the key to the success in that role was that I was forced and really enjoyed doing research about every single one of my companies and backgrounds. I had the pleasure of working with manufacturers that focused on welding, steel mills, pharmaceutical companies, hospitals, your food and flavor companies. I even had meat packing companies. One of my companies, I flew out to North Carolina, and I don't know if you would call it a complete pleasure, but I had the exposure of seeing how, between us, Purdue and Tyson prepare some of their meat and their chicken. And being a city girl, I guess you can say, from Northwest Indiana, right outside of Chicago, we're not used to seeing chickens hanging upside down, going through on a rotary, getting ready to be frozen with CO2 so that they can be butchered. But it gave me great perspective on what my customer or my client's need would be, understanding their operation. While at Praxair, the key piece of mentoring really showed up for me. I met a woman who, quite frankly, I saw her walking and moving in throughout the office. I saw that she was well received and liked by her peers as well as her superiors. And I said, that is someone I want to get to know. And quite frankly, someone I want to be like. And I stepped out and introduced myself the next time I saw her. Her and I ended up having a conversation. We talked about my background. We talked about my desire to stay in the sales field, but indeed expand outside of inside sales. And her and I began to build a relationship. And she told me early on, listen, continue to work hard. I've got you if any opportunities come up. And so through that process, I began to transcend, but wasn't at the time prepared to have to pick up and relocate to another state. That's another piece and a nugget that I'll give you all. Depending on your personal situations, your flexibility in being able to relocate can open up a great deal of opportunity within the company that you're at, or even pursuing other companies. A colleague of mine right now, has changed his resume to highlight that one of the key pieces as he looks for a job is his flexibility and willingness to move and even potentially pay for that relocation depending on the distance. That's a key piece that now, a lot of employers are looking at, because in this virtual environment, you may not, in some cases, you may be able to stay where you are, but it may require you to have larger territories or cover more ground that require you to be a little bit more flexible in your ability to relocate. But for me at the time, I was not able to make a big relocation or move. And I was starting to outgrow the position I was in. Quite frankly, I was getting pressured by upper management to either take the promotion or figure out what I was going to do. And so in that time, I did begin to apply for some positions, and I transitioned into a role of a senior account manager with Univar USA, which is a distribution company of ingredients, raw materials, and chemicals. Now, how things come full circle is that I started out letting you all know that I worked as a chemist at Nippon B Coatings, which was a large OEM manufacturer. And so at this point, this is about 3.5 to 4 years later, as I transitioned to Univar, who sold raw materials. I sold things like caustic soda, ethylene glycol, nitric acid. I even sold salt, sugar. I had my customers were companies like Tootsie Roll, H2O products, Luster Products, which is a hair company. Victoria's Secret was a company of mine. Sun Chemicals and Products, which makes detergents. Solo Cup was a customer of mine. The Railroad, Norfolk Southern, U.S. Steel. And lo and behold, Nippon B Coatings became to be one of my customers. So where I literally started my career, built relationship, and performed at a high level, I then transitioned to actually having them be now a customer of mine who actually had to buy product from me. And so in that transition is where I really began to solidify my true sales career. I did business to business sales as well as distribution sales in that role. I managed relationships with both transportation companies as well as key manufacturers in the raw materials that I provided. A key piece in all of this is that as you take on roles, have a plan of ultimately what it is you're trying to get from the role outside of course, a nice financial, a good salary. My goal was to make sure that I was steadily being able to develop my chemical knack while at the same time creating a documented successful career in sales. In doing that, I ended up being the highest performing sales representative on the team, as well as being the youngest and being the only woman. At that time, while I probably had catapulted to making some of the most money I had ever made, I didn't have very good work-life balance. A lot of things at home, quite frankly, suffered with me and my son because I spent most of my time literally closing deals. I was on the phone or on the computer at my son's games, not being fully present. And while I was able to provide, that was the peak time in my life where I understood that making money is not more important than having personal happiness and ensuring that your family life is solid, as well as that you're solid. I was extremely stressed and stretched really thin. And I also began to understand that I wasn't truly fulfilled in terms of what I was giving back to life. I'm making money, I'm selling chemicals, but I didn't feel I was changing anyone's life. I wasn't imparting anything into other people. And again, the key piece, my son wasn't getting the best me he could get. And so out of that, I began to dig a little bit deeper and say, okay, what can I do with my technical background that now I've developed sales? Where could I go? And of course, the healthcare field through pharmaceutical sales stood out. And so I had built some relationships being in Indianapolis, as Eli Lilly Corporation is a huge staple in that city. And I went ahead and applied for an opportunity to work with them. Now, what you'll find that oftentimes in the pharmaceutical industry, you can only get in if you've had some sort of pharma experience. And as a new grad or even someone approaching your senior year, you're like, well, how do I get the experience? That's the only thing about the professional realm that drives you crazy. You're like, okay, well, I'm looking for the experience. And so what I had to do was be very creative in how I structured my resume to highlight the experience and interaction I had had with pharmaceutical companies through the other two industries, which were chemical companies. And through that partnership, that helped set the foundation for my ability to be able to sell into the pharmaceutical industry, of where I did that at Eli Lilly. And I focused my career primarily in diabetes, pouring back into the community that I grew up and lived in Northwest Indiana, including East Chicago, Gary, Indiana, Hammond, Indiana. During that time at Lilly, of where I must say I was the most fulfilled personally and professionally, being able to make an impact with doctors as they make decisions on how they're going to treat or save the lives of patients that look just like you and I, that may be our extended family members. It gave me a whole different perspective of the value you have. And I don't even have a medical degree, but being able to understand in-depth chemical background on different medications allowed me to be really successful in doing that. And I see the note there, so we're going to get ready to prepare for some Q&A. So I'll wrap that up by saying that transitioned me into the role that I am in now as a senior biopharmaceutical sales rep at Amgen, of where I now work on the nephrology team, working very closely with nephrologists who partner with large dialysis organizations like your Fresenius's as well as your DaVitas. And within this role, I've had an opportunity to be a leader in the form of a district sales trainer. I've performed in the top 10 of the country. My first year in the role, I won the award of Rookie of the Year, outperforming just as well, if not better, than many of my more experienced counterparts. And then most recently earning the award of MVP for my team in the Chicago district. So I'll go ahead and stop there because I've given you all a mouthful, and I want you to be able to ask me questions, and then I can directly be able to answer them and give you a little bit more insight from there. Is that all right, Shri?
Yes, ma'am, that is perfect. And so our moderator for our Q&A session is going to be our Alpha President, Helen. So make sure that you have your questions for Ashley, as she's just giving you so much insight, but maybe you have additional questions on, some of you are in STEM, some of you are in business and do seek to work with 500 Fortune companies. Some of you are also thinking about entrepreneurship. And so in the intro, we did let you know that Ashley is the CEO of Chef Ashley Nicole, which go to her Facebook. The food is amazing. Amazing. I'll let President Helen start with some introductory questions, but feel free to provide them in the chat so that we can make sure that we get them to Helen, who is then going to make sure that they get to Ashley.
Thank you, Ashley. Your presentation was awesome. I was able to learn a lot, especially as a senior. I think it's very important to have those meetings with your manager and like kind of finding out what you like. One question that I have, if you can answer, is did you participate in any internships or professional organization involvement that opened doors for you during your undergrad experience?
Absolutely, great question. So I was a little bit behind the ball on the professional organizations, and I shared that with Emma prior to us starting. For all of you all who are currently involved with Alpha or interested in being in an Alpha and or base, I encourage you to get involved early and right away. Just like I'm on this platform kind of sharing my trajectory, I hate that I didn't establish that within myself early, because that's a key piece to building your network. Even if you don't need to reach out or pursue some of the professionals you meet with right away, knowing and understanding, number one, just where you can go with your degree. I started out as a bench chemist. I work now, the rest of my career has been in sales and now in pharma, and I didn't see myself there. So indeed, getting involved in those organizations is key. I did later on become a member of the American Chemical Society my senior year, which afforded me a ton of exposure to internships that I applied for but didn't get at the time. However, where I ended up landing was also through my outside social network and my sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. There were a great deal of different professionals in that organization who helped support me landing on my feet. So while I wasn't involved in a ton, I would suggest do get involved in professional organizations early and take on a role. That's the key piece to get remembered too. Don't be afraid to take on a leadership role. You'll be mentored and guided throughout that process, but indeed do that.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. We do have one question on the chat, and it's from Mega. Her question is, do you have any tips as a successful salesperson for students who wish to go into marketing post-grad?
Absolutely. So while that wasn't my initial foundation, as you can imagine, being in sales, marketing is a huge piece of that. So one of the things you already have in your pocket is that you've gotten the foundation of understanding the importance of features and benefits of products, understanding how to solve solutions, and understanding how to target a market. Those are all key things in sales. Understanding how to cater what we would consider your sales pitch for the group or the audience that you're dealing and working with. One of the key things I would say across the board is entry level is a huge blessing. While you may not make a ton of money, right? The key piece when you're first graduating is getting experience and excelling in that role in whatever capacity it is. One of the things I mentioned early on is documenting what you do. If you've been given a project and you finish it early, if you've been asked to step up, and I don't care if you're the person who sends out the morning motivational message for the team every week, you document that, right? I served as a leader to motivate and encourage my team members to stay on task and to finish their goals. Whatever it is, do that. But entry level is key. And for me, if you have to take multiple entry level positions initially, don't be afraid to do that. One other piece is that in sales, as you begin to be successful in sales or marketing and you document that, companies are going to see that and they're going to want to approach you. What a lot of you all may see on my resume is that in my career, I've transitioned through companies every couple of years. Wasn't my goal and plan to do that. But if you are a documented successful person, you will get approached for opportunities. And quite frankly, what you find out is that you typically make the most money as you leave a company. Now, I do not suggest every 6 months or a year you go and you leave, because at the end of the day, a company will be concerned of your ability to stay long-term. Right now, I'm at a company that I love. I have no desire to leave quickly. I want to continue to develop myself and build relationships. However, my previous career paths did afford me opportunities to leave and then make more money in doing so. Sorry, I gave you a little extra, but hopefully I answered your question.
So I have a question. So you had kind of mentioned, like you said, you went to a bunch of different companies during your professional trajectory. Sorry. So do you have any tips for people on like finding a good fit and kind of like going through that process, even like, finding a good major that really works with what you're hoping to do if you aren't really sure?
Yeah, great question. So, Sheree and I briefly talked about that before I hopped on the call. Understanding your personality trait is so important, right? So one of the things I shared is that I'm an outgoing introvert in essence, but what I found that as much as I can be a nerd and love the technical aspect, I didn't love being stuck in the lab. And, I got a lot of that experience, obviously, in my degree as an undergrad. So I knew, working as a chemist, you're going to spend time in the lab. And I had gotten so far in my career that I knew I didn't want to turn around and not complete my major. So the key thing is that as you are seeking opportunities, look very deeply into the job description, right? If you know that, okay, being in a lab is fine, but I want to get out and meet customers. As you're interviewing or, going deeper into that organization, ask those questions. Say, hey, listen, I love doing this on the technical side, but as you can see, I'm full of personality. What opportunities do I have to be able to meet with customers face to face? Or, what opportunities are there for me to work on projects across other business units? Companies actually like that, because that's another way you're establishing yourself as well, and you're building relationships where now someone outside of your actual department can say, hey, I worked with her on a project. She's great at project management, speaks up, finishes her projects on time, and then before you know it, you're now transitioning into something that may not have been completely of where you started, but opened up a door for you. Now, in terms of selecting a major, because I'll admit that's tough, right? Coming, out of high school, you're going in, you go into college and they want you to know the path for your whole life. You haven't even been exposed enough to life to know that. So one of the things I've told people, and I have a 19-year-old who's about to go off to school, is that if your first year needs to be an exploratory year where you're just making sure you're taking key classes that are, kind of across the board, explore that, right? If you're not sure about science, take a science class, take an art class, take a foreign language class, take a religion class. I love fashion. I didn't love it enough at the time to go into it, but in hindsight, I would have took some sort of fashion design class just to understand the ins and outs of that. If you can afford yourself to do that, do that. It took me 5 years to finish college, and it wasn't for a lack of my, inability to, but I started to slow down and say, okay, I want to feed in some things that feed my personality and that aren't just only focused on my professional goal. So I would suggest doing that until you find what you love.
Perfect. We have a couple more questions in the chat. Next question is from Erica. Her question is, how did you navigate the interview process, since it's a little bit intimidating based on the type of interview?
You know what? I'm so glad you asked that, and it's true, right? I'm a nervous wreck before every interview, sweating under my pits, the whole nine. But I'll admit, preparation is key. So with any company, doing your research, using LinkedIn. Another key thing is use Indeed. Go and look up, because on Indeed, you can see other people who have interviewed and left comments. Sometimes they'll even say who they interviewed with or what that person's position is, whether it was a director, a CEO, a district manager. Look at people on there who have left the company and why they cite they have left the company. Keeping in mind that everybody's experience is going to be personal to them, right? There's different factors that play into why they may have left or why they like it, but you can get a wide range of perspective of what it is you're going into. Oftentimes you can see on there on Indeed people who made it through the interview process. So they'll be people who didn't make it through, they'll be a little salty, right? But you can see they may list questions that they feel that they may have gotten tripped up on. Another thing I would do by using LinkedIn is go and seek out some employees that are already there, looking at some of what, if they've been in the role that you're pursuing, introduce yourself on LinkedIn, try at least do this 2 or 3 weeks ahead of time. If you have that level of a timeline, give yourself some time and let them know, hey, I'm interested in working at Amgen and I want to be successful in this interview process. What are some key things I want to keep in mind as I enter it? And so I asked those questions to the person I consider my mentor. And, she made it very clear that understanding the product portfolio was important, understanding the business unit that I was going into was important. And then even deeper than that, understanding the end user, right? Or the companies I would be calling on. So I began to research that and make sure that both the personal and professional skills I had already had would translate over to what they would need. And the biggest piece in anything is understanding what you bring to the table. How is it that you are going to be of value to them? One thing every company needs is somebody who can solve problems, right? Another thing a company needs is someone who maintains a positive attitude even through adversity. Companies always need hardworking, self-sufficient people who take the lead. Companies need people who are inquisitive and open to learning and being mentored. And then last but not least, companies need people who are able to be consistent in being able to produce. And so when you do your research and figure out what exactly it would be you're connecting yourself to, whatever they're looking for, figure out what you can add to that. The last piece, this may sound like a lot, is that I've literally gone through and I've copied and pasted the job description. And I've gone through each bullet point on there and saw what it was I could do, and even found some areas of opportunity where I knew I would need to work on that. That's a really good piece to kind of guide you through an interview process, is to speak to the actual job description.
That's awesome. Very, very helpful tips for everyone that's here today. We have another question related to being part of the Greek organization. So it says,
Mhm.
are you part of any Greek organizations? And if so, have you seen any benefits to doing so while searching for employment? Also, what are the tips that you have in succeeding in the workplace as a woman of color?
She's
Two
a
great
member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, founded January 15, 1908 on a Wednesday at Howard University at Minor Hall. But she will be able to let you know about the 14 years of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, which is the same sorority of Madam Vice President Kamala Harris. You want to tell them more about our illustrious sorority, soror, Ashley Tarver.
Thank you. As you can see, there's a lot of passion behind that because Cherie and I are sorority sisters. And if you know anything about sororities, there's a lot of things we're sworn to secrecy about. But just know, her and I, we've got quite a history, okay, going through the process personally and professionally. And what I can say is that while initially I didn't pursue Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated based on a professional desire, but I am here today through my membership, friendship, partnership from that organization, of which Cherie and I bonded deeply in. So there is so much value in getting involved in Greek-led organizations, both in a professional sense, as well as a social and a community service sense. My organization, we have 114 years of service and sisterhood to all mankind, but more importantly, focusing tremendously on our pillar of academics and academic excellence. And so just to answer your question directly, there's an extreme amount of value, but with anything, the value in it is what you put forth the effort. Because in any organization, the key is going to be the networking. And when we hear that and we use that word, sometimes a little bit loosely, but what that means is establishing relationships throughout it, right? And in order to do that, you have to step up and be willing to lead, be willing to introduce yourself, have something ready, what we call an elevator pitch. And what that is a, maybe up to a 60-second overview of who you are, what you do or what you're trying to pursue, and the things you can specialize in. I'll give you all a quick example. And they call it an elevator pitch, meaning in the event you're in an elevator for a quick second, let's say you end up meeting the CEO of Amazon. You're in the elevator and you're like, hey, that's him, that's the CEO of Amazon. And you're like, holy crap, like, okay, what do I do? What do I say? So you can even step up and say, hey, are you, so-and-so? And he says, yeah, I am. Wow, it is such an honor to even be here in the elevator with you. My name's Ashley Tarver. I'm a chemist by trade. I work as a pharmaceutical sales rep. I've got an established career of sales. I'm also an entrepreneur. I've been really interested in finding a platform to sell my other products. And I just thought the other day that Amazon might be a great place to start that. What do you think about me selling XYZ? There you go. You've told them who you are, what you're about, what you do professionally, and also your, in my case, my side opportunities. And you've now right there in the moment asked them for some advice. And I guarantee you, he would answer you back. And now you've made an impression in his mind. So let's say you're in the same hotel or the same professional environment. If he runs into you, he's going to say, hey, oh, that's Ashley. You're a biopharmaceutical sales rep, aren't you? So that's another huge nugget I would suggest, and you all can look it up in Google, but have an elevator pitch in every aspect of life. Be able to quickly let those you encounter know exactly who you are and what your goals are.
Thank you, Ashley. You have such awesome tips today for everyone here. Another question, it's more like a culinary question. It's from Juan. He said, when did you start to take what you ate into control? For example, when you began to eat out less and cook at home more. Due to the decline in home economic classes being provided, I hope to immerse myself in the culinary industry.
Great question. And I also didn't speak to that being an African-American woman question, so I'll come back to that, but I'll answer his. So listen, my friends, my family, they know me. If I'm not gonna do anything, Ashley's gonna eat, Okay, she loves eating. I gained every bit of the freshman 15, 20, 25. I don't know what it was, but I gained it, especially because yes, you're eating out, you're on campus, limited, ability to cook things or even just afford to necessarily buy a ton of groceries, whatever the case is. However, the thing that you guys have at your fingertips that when I was in school, it wasn't as big, right? Social media has developed tremendously, and you have YouTube, okay? Get on YouTube and immerse yourself. So some of the key chefs, I love Chef Ramsay. I was actually going to apply to be on Master Chef, but I didn't want to use up all my vacation time to be off for a couple of weeks, so I didn't do it. But get on YouTube and follow little recipes, right? If you naturally have a knack for food, you love to taste different foods, you have a palate that you're willing to explore. I grew up around my great grandmother, who was a wonderful cook, and because I love to eat, I also wanted to know how to make those things. So I was one of the go-to people that would cook on campus when I transitioned into moving into our campus apartments. And some of it was basic meals, just learning how to make a really good spaghetti, okay? Changing up different sauces, putting a little twist to it, adding Italian sausage, maybe a little turkey, meat in there, regular breakfast sausage. So explore. The culinary piece came for me through my natural love for art, right? I cook with my eyes as well as wanting to make sure it tastes good and make things look beautiful. So just explore. And then, if there's local chefs around, if you go to a restaurant and you love the food, ask the waiter if they'd be willing to let you meet the chef. And if not, because they could be busy, just send back a compliment and let them know you're someone who is exploring the culinary background and you love the taste dimensions, the flavor dimensions that you're experiencing on that food. And then the one piece about being African American, being Black in this industry as well, in any form of a minority, let's be clear, it has not necessarily been the easiest means of being able to transition. Majority of sales is typically male dominated. And so the important piece for a woman, especially a woman of color, is not being afraid to lean in. Okay, literally, if I am in a room and I'm at a table, if I've got a seat at that table, I am leaning in, I'm sitting up firm, I'm taking notes, I'm giving great eye contact, I'm ensuring that my voice is strong. I've done my research before going in. If I don't know something, I'm taking notes about the presenter. I'm figuring out a way to ask a question. One of the key things a mentor told me is never leave a room without asking a question. If given an opportunity to ask a question. So if I'm in a room and there's 300 people and they're passing the mic, I'm popping up and I'm figuring out something to ask, right? Because even if you, again, are not making the connection with the speaker, that's 299 other people that are now going to be interested in what you do, what you bring to the table, where you work, and where you're from. In every aspect of life, it is about leaving an impression on people when you meet them. And so the key piece is not being afraid to lean in, have your voice heard, and to truly understand there's no such thing as a silly or a stupid question at all.
Thank you. Next question is from William. He's asking, how will you advise an international student to navigate in the American corporate world when looking for an internship or an entry-level job? Do you think international experience gives you an advantage when looking for jobs? And how will you present your international experience to use it in your favor?
Oh, goodness. International experience is amazing. So I ended up getting that, once I got into my role of a chemist, because I was able to connect with those in Japan. That, to be honest, I believe that aspect on my resume alone, right, was a huge key piece in understanding that you have the aptitude to not only navigate something domestically, but if given opportunities for projects, you understand the different knacks of dealing with other cultures, right? I think that's a key piece as well. As a pharmaceutical sales rep, I spend a lot of time talking to doctors. Oftentimes, those doctors are foreign. They're not necessarily from America. So even understanding that I may be dealing with a male Indian doctor, that in their culture, right, in some ways, women are a lot more subservient. So understanding that I had to learn, there was a doctor who would not look me in the eye when he spoke to me. He would be very short with me when he would talk to me. But when my male counterpart would come in, he would open up to him, speak a lot more in depth. And at first I took it personal. But then I had to step back and understand it was more of a cultural difference than it was about me. It wasn't about my ability or lack thereof. So with that, before I go off on a tangent, right? International experience is key. If you are truly the international student, again, you come with a different level of expertise, knowing how to navigate, outside of our company and our culture, but in that same realm, learning the American culture, how a lot of executives work and how they see things, and just the different key important pieces of navigating a company by putting yourself out there and meeting other people, even virtually, sending an email to someone in a different department, letting them know you're interested in what they do and how you can take, some key pointers to help make your job, help do your job even better.
Thank you. So next question we have, it's from Elisa. Her question is, how do you establish a relationship with a new contact? What questions do you suggest we ask in order to turn it into a mentorship? And what tips do you have for getting internship in a competitive company or competitive companies?
Sure. One of the key pieces is being authentic. So whether you see someone in person, let's say, you see someone and you find out what their name is and who they are, go into your company's internal system, research exactly, what they do, what their role entitles, who may work underneath them, or even who they work for, what team they're on. And then figure out what it is that you want to get from them, but also make sure you're positioning it in a manner where they see the value in mentoring you, because it takes time, right? It takes time away from their schedule and their day to be a mentor. So making sure that, so I'll give an example. The lady that I approached found out that she was an exec on the executive sales team. She had a science background just like I did. She was an engineer, and she managed larger contracts. So when I did approach her, I let her know that I knew a little bit about her. So her name was Keisha. I said, hey, Keisha, I'm Ashley. Listen, I've seen you here in the office. I recognize that you're a corporate account manager and you have a science background like I do. Would you mind if we could go to lunch and you tell me a little bit about how you've kind of transitioned through your career? And she was more than open to it. Now, we didn't get a chance to go to lunch until about a month later from that, but we went to lunch, during the lunch hour. Our first lunch was just in the cafeteria, sitting in the corner. And sometimes, maybe you're not in an environment where you can go to lunch, right? That was different, as far before COVID. So, you can simply say, hey, would it be okay if I send you an email and we could maybe set up a time to talk? Or, could I give you a call? Do you have a card I could reference? Simply asking them, what they're willing to do and to offer, and letting them know it's particular because you see where they are and that's somewhere you would ultimately like to be.
That was
And
awesome.
I think I just saw someone ask, like, how do you know the right contacts? And so, like, even with that, I didn't necessarily know that she was going to be the right person, but I knew that she was well respected in the field that she was in. But for the right contacts, I would say that's where you would use LinkedIn or even your internal, whatever company you may be at, your internal system. So say, for instance, also your mentorship can be on the team or the group that you're in. So another key thing I did was, one of the more senior people on my team, I would lean on them for guidance, right? Of course, I would do my research and things like that. But one of the key things you want to learn is that your manager or your director or whoever your boss is actually the last person you want to go to for direction. What you want to attempt to do is build some relationships with colleagues around the same level as you, or maybe 1 or 2 levels above you, and get their insight before you go to your manager, because it is important to be viewed by your manager as someone who's a problem solver, someone who does research, and someone who works closely with their peers, right? Being a team player and sharing information across within a business unit is key, because again, these people are going to speak on your behalf and about you. The last thing you want them to say is, oh, Ashley's really distant. She doesn't reach out to anyone. We hardly hear from her. We don't know what she's doing. So you want to have conversations internally. That's the first place you build your network, is within your team. After that, of course, you want to make sure that you're staying close with your manager, but finding out who's on your manager's level. Now, you never want to go over their head per se, but you also just want to understand who are some of the colleagues they work closely with, and make sure you're also being seen in a positive light by their peers. Because it's nothing like your manager hearing from another one like, hey, I saw your newest colleague over there. She was networking with, some of my team, was asking some great questions. So that's important too. I don't think it's as important of the level that the person is on, but just making sure obviously they've got a little bit more experience than you do so that you can take something from it.
Thank you. We have time for about one or two more questions. And if we don't get to them, we will send them to Ashley for her to reply, and then we'll get back to the students. The following question says, I know that we are encouraged to participate in internships to help us get some hands-on experience in what we want to do, as well as make connections with the higher up people in that field. But will it be beneficial to have more than one internship at different places or stay with one company for the internship?
The answer can be yes to both. So I would say stay at one company. If your first experience with them is one that you enjoyed and you want to learn more, stay with that one company, because you will likely position yourself to be able to get hired by that one company. If there's an opportunity to say 1 year you're in manufacturing with that company, but the next year there's an opportunity for you to look in marketing or some other aspect, I would say do that. At the same time, I'd say open yourself up to interning at multiple companies, because now you have multiple places where you've established relationships and you've gotten experience and you can see how different companies operate. While there might be a general framework, each company is going to have a different frame of directive. They're going to have a different group of leaders. And what you will ultimately find professionally is that it's not as much about the company you work for as much as it is the team and the person you directly report to. So the more exposure you have to that, the better. And that can be done by staying at one company in multiple capacities or establishing yourself in multiple areas, which is always a great resume builder, right? Showing that you've had experience across the board. So there isn't a wrong direction with that. But again, I would only stay if I know I loved it there. If it was just, okay, no sense in, you can expand and try another company.
Thank you. And there's one more question that we can go over, and then if other students have other questions, Ashley will be more than happy to answer them. We'll be sending it to her right after this. The question is, how did you know which superiors to speak to when establishing that you want to move up in the company? Not all superiors take interns or entry-level positions seriously.
Sure. Again, your entry level position is key, right? That is truly the place where you're going to establish yourself as a professional, as one that can be trusted, as one who is consistent, as one who performs, right? That's the key, right? Performing and documenting that you do perform. That's also where there's the room for error, right? To learn. There's so much about the professional environment that I don't think can necessarily be taught, completely by taking classes. You learn a lot about how you navigate, the language that you should use with different professionals, being able to, cater, again, your messaging, your speech. But in terms of who, I think I may have spoken to this right before that question came through, is that anybody who has a little bit more experience than you, right? You can start out with someone who's been there 6 months longer than you. They've got 6 months more understanding of this company than you do, right? You partner with them, you learn some things from them. In that same process, you're still networking. If you're in a situation where you work at a company, and again, if they have a lunchroom, and even if it's social distancing, sit at a table with where there's only one person, be polite and ask them, hey, do you mind if I sit here? They say yes or no. Spark up conversation. Hey, I'm new here. I'm just trying to meet people. You mind telling me a little bit about what you do? That might connect to, what I can do later on. It's just being willing to connect with people. There's no wrong person or wrong level to connect with. You may slip up and find out that you're connecting with one of the vice presidents of the company, and now they'll speak on your behalf. So just being open to meet people and talk to them in general.
Well, we want to thank Ashley Tarver for being here. If you can use your emojis or your chat to thank her for her time. She actually is traveling on behalf of her company right now. And Also, please, on behalf of myself, wish her a happy birthday. She
Oh, thanks.
just celebrated a birthday on Thursday. So we are thanking her for not only all her accomplishments, but also all the informative tips and resources. So in the chat, we did provide Ashley's contact information. As she just talked about, LinkedIn is very important. So if you haven't already done so, go ahead and set up your LinkedIn page so that you can make sure that you get connected with Ashley, that you connect with her and ask any questions. We have tallied all the questions that either was in the chat or Helen or Emma or Director Butler has received, and we will make sure if they were not answered in this session that we will get those to Ashley. Just want to make sure that we follow up with Ashley. Is there anything that was not spoken about or touched on today for your last final word? Any other thing you want to say to the students?
Oh, me. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm being quiet. I'm thinking it was anything else they wanted to say. I'm like, sure, whatever they want to, whatever else. The only other piece, the key things, yes, I can't say them enough. Networking, mentorship, doing your research about the company, even after you get to the company, still do research. Now that one piece about LinkedIn, of course, you can reach out to people through their LinkedIn Messenger, but let's say you're trying to get to know people within your company, you already have the email string and format. One of the key things we use in business is once you figure out what that string is, you have access to any and everyone in the company. So if the email is their first name dot last name, figure out a way to get yourself connected with them. And then the other piece is work on that elevator speech. Have something powerful and impactful to say about yourself. Don't be afraid to brag about yourself. That was something I had to get used to, because oftentimes you feel like, oh, that sounds so arrogant. But if you don't tell people who you are and what you do, you can't expect anybody else to. So be bold in that. As you're graduating, if you're a graduating senior, a lot of what you're going to speak to is what you did throughout your college career. So speak to the leadership roles that you've taken in organizations, speak to your performance. I'm proud to say I graduated in IUPUI's top 100. I was the only African-American person, period, and the only African-American woman to graduate with a degree in chemistry from the Purdue School of Science in 2009. So that's huge. So while you don't have experience yet, what you've told and a future employer is that you perform at the top of whatever you do. Even as a minority in some cases, you're not afraid of a challenge, and it doesn't stop your ability to perform. And even as a science major, where at times we're looked at as people who aren't good salespeople, always speak to the fact that when you're majoring in anything technical, right, that means you have the aptitude to understand very difficult concepts and break them down in a manner that they can be understood then at people of all levels. So that's what I'll leave you with.
Yes, so you are also witnessing history. I am so remiss to forget that she is the first African-American female graduate of the chemistry department at IUPUI. And she is always doing great accolades. She is actually here in the region. So not only contact her if you have any questions, especially she took a different route, going into chemistry, because I remember she wanted to go into pharmacy, but life
I was
had
going to go to pharmacy school.
Yes. Life had a different way, and she made good money, and she got a company car, and she got a house, and she doing all kinds of good stuff, y'all. So she made real good money, and she just came from Miami. Like, I just want to be like her when I grow up. So don't let all this, glamour phase you. She got a good life over there, and she fashion red bottoms, the purses, but in actuality, she works very, very hard. And rookie year, tons of promotions, and again, as we talked about in her bio, just the promotions are endless. So if you want to connect to Ashley, please do that on LinkedIn as well as on Facebook. Follow her at Chef Ashley Nicole. She does have a promotion for Mother's Day. So if you need that last minute Mother's Day gourmet gift in the region, you can do that. But please, she is more than willing to answer questions and provide insight, especially if you're looking and going to pharmaceutical sales. She would be more than happy to not only talk to you about that industry, but also provide her network. So LinkedIn is great. So we are going to thank Ashley for her time, give her a virtual hand clap, and we are going to transition into lunch. I'm going to give it over to Alpha to transition us as we depart from Ashley. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been an honor. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
And I will hand the floor